G'day, and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life. And when I started this channel back in 2018, really I should have called myself Kiwi Honda Life because I owned, drove, and reviewed pretty much nothing but Hondas. They were the gold standard in my mind, and I really had no reason to drive anything else. I certainly wouldn't have considered owning one of those unreliable European cars. But after a number of years of owning a whole lot of Hondas that were all basically the same, eventually I got the urge to try something new. My friends recommended BMW, and I went out and bought the most reliable BMW I could find, a manual BMW 130i. And I had 20,000 kilometers of totally trouble-free motoring in that car, which set in motion a number of BMW ownerships that I have very fond memories of. And so BMW became the new gold standard, and I really had no reason to own a Skoda or a Volkswagen, Audi or a Porsche. I mean, how could they possibly be better? They weren't even rear-wheel drive, and yet, here we are. 2 years ago, I bought a Skoda Octavia VRS, which to this day I would still consider to be the best daily driver I've ever owned. And a year and a half ago, I bought an Audi TT 3.2 manual, a car that I didn't really plan on keeping for too long, but 25,000 kilometers later, I've still got it and have absolutely no intentions on getting rid of it. And so, with a successful first entry into the Vag Group market, I expanded to a supercharged S5, a manual V8 S4, a couple of Porsche Cayennes, and now I've bought another one, the baby S car, a second generation Audi S3. One look at the outside of this car will pretty quickly reveal why it was only $4,000. And unfortunately, there's quite a lot more wrong with this cheap Audi S3 as well. This morning, I flew down to cold but sunny Christchurch on a Bogan missile to pick this car up, and encountered problem number one. Pretty soon after driving it away from the workshop, one of the coil packs started to die. So I popped into the super cheap auto, picked up a new NGK coil pack, and installed it in the car park, and now it's boosting fantastically. So the engine, transmission, and clutch are in good health, as is the Warner Fitness. The owner kindly got a new WAF for me before I picked it up. But from there, it goes from bad to worse. 7 out of the 12 panels on this car have some fairly substantial lack appeal. Both of the number plates are absolutely wrecked. There's a nice bit of damage to the front bumper, and one of the fog light grills is missing, and pretty much all of the wheels are curbed and chipped to no tomorrow. This car has definitely had a very hard 228,000 kilometers here under the harsh New Zealand sun. Inside, things are similarly average. There's a broken vent. The Sony head unit is absolutely disgusting and has to go immediately. There's a fairly significant amount of fade on the steering wheel. The headliner is sagging in typical Audi fashion. And there are a myriad of warning lights all over the dash, which leads us to the mechanical problems. Fortunately, as far as turbocharged Audis go, this S3 is actually one of the more reliable ones. It uses the old Mark V Golf GTI engine, but tuned up to 195 kilowatt and 350 newton meters of torque. Fortunately, it's been serviced pretty recently, and the cam belt was done at 180,000 kilometers. But it's really everything around the engine that's having problems on this particular example. The washer fluid bottle is leaking, both of the fog lights aren't working, there's also a reoccurring automatic headlight fault, and the car isn't reaching temperature, suggesting the thermostat's shot. So as you can appreciate, there is quite a lot this poor little Audi S3 needs to get it restored back to its former glory. But that is exactly what we're going to do today. Let's hit the road back to Wellington and start the restoration process.
Before tackling the biggest job, the dreadful state of the paintwork, I decided to complete all of the smaller fixes first. I began by replacing the hideous Sony head unit for the factory Audi Symphony one that fortunately came with the car. The factory unit slid right back in and worked perfectly. This greatly improved the aesthetics of the interior. Next, I re-glued a section of the headliner that was sagging a little towards the back, and I rebuilt one of the air vents that was a bit broken using parts from a wrecked car. I also drilled out the 3 rivets holding on the B-pillar trim and replaced it with a used one that was in better condition. Then I set to work cleaning the interior. I vacuumed the carpets, front and rear, a task that fortunately wasn't too difficult as the car was already quite clean inside. I applied some leather conditioner to the seats to bring them back to life a bit, and I thoroughly scrubbed the filthy steering wheel and control surfaces that had quite a lot of makeup residue on them. And with that, the interior was complete. So then I moved on to the mechanical fixes. The entire drive home from Christchurch, the car was beeping every few seconds to tell me there was a fault with the automatic headlights. So I simply unplugged the sensor for now to shut that up and put fixing that on the back burner. Then I moved round to the front and plugged the fog lights back in to clear 2 more dashboard faults, but I noticed that one was full of moisture, so I cleaned that out, and the other had a broken tab, so I re-glued that back together. I also poured boiling water on the bumper to soften the plastic and push the dent back out again, and finally I ordered a new fog light grille for the passenger side, which I'll install after repainting everything. The final mechanical fix was to replace the thermostat, as the car never quite reached operating temperature the whole way home. This turned out to be a much larger job than I initially expected. With the engine cover removed, I removed the accessory belt and the 2 bolts holding on the alternator before undoing the electrical connections and taking that out. With the thermostat in sight, I unbolted and unclipped the 3 coolant pipe connections, and I undid the 2 hex screws holding it to the block. With it finally removed, I installed the new one and put the whole front end of the car back together and poured in some new coolant. Now, the interior and all of the mechanical fixes were complete, and it was time to tackle the paintwork. I began by seeing how many panels I'd need to repaint by first trying to polish the chalky and flaky paint. To my surprise, the chalky paint polished up really nice, and after a bit of wet sanding, the bonnet I decided was tolerable, but the roof and front bumper were just too far gone. So I removed the front bumper with a number of screws under the bonnet, on the undertray, and in the wheel arches, and with that off, I began sanding it. Now, I should preface that I am not a panel beater and really have no idea what I'm doing, so don't expect a professional job from me, but nonetheless, with the bumper smooth and it wiped down with isopropyl alcohol, I began painting. I layered on 5 or 6 coats of base coat, which actually turned out really nice, but the clear coat was a disaster. For some reason, I just couldn't get that nice, glossy, smooth finish, so I tried a much thicker coat, which just made a whole lot of runs. The next day, I decided to try thoroughly wet sanding it with 1200 and 2000 grit sandpaper and then polishing it, which fortunately saved what was otherwise a pretty terrible paint job. With the bumper back on the car, I would describe it as good from far, but far from good. Then I moved on to the roof. After sanding everything down, I masked off all around the edges and around the sunroof and applied the base coat. Unfortunately though, while it was smooth to the touch before painting, the previous bubbles in the clear coat began to come back through. Really, I should have just stripped it fully and started right from the beginning, but I'd already spent over $300 on paint, and honestly, on a car this cheap in high Ks, I didn't really think anyone would care that much. So, after applying the clear coat, which once again didn't go on very nicely at all, I thoroughly wet sanded it again, and after a solid hour of polishing, it was a poor finish, but it was at least shiny. With the car all back together, I washed the outside, clearing off all the mess I'd made from painting and the grime that had built up over years of driving, and I polished the rest of the panels that I hadn't done earlier. Honestly, compared with how it looked when I first bought it, I was actually pretty impressed at how nicely it was coming up. I did a bit of a DIY job repairing the curbed wheels by painting them with a colour matched touch-up bottle, and the final job was to install some new number plates. And with that, the S3 was officially restored to its former glory. The freshly completed Audi S3. And honestly, to my surprise, I've actually found this to be a very, very good car. It's certainly plenty quick with 195 kilowatts at your disposal. It's got very short gears. That means you can very easily keep the car right up in the power band. It's got fantastic steering feel and really impressive handling with the Haldex to haul you nicely out of corners, but at the same time it is still very much an Audi S car. It's got a timeless interior design, a fantastic looking steering wheel, lovely comfortable seats, all the features you could ever need, and despite the fact that it has a 4-cylinder engine, which at face value is not the most interesting power plant available. Personally, something like the supercharged V6 that I had in the S5, or the 4.2 liter V8 I had in my S4, or even the
the VR6 that I've got in my TT or a Golf R32, in my mind they are more exciting engines than this little 4-cylinder. But nonetheless, I've actually been pleasantly surprised at how great this little 8P is to drive. It revs right out to 7,000 RPM very happily, makes an impressive amount of boost, and really pushes this thing along at a pretty hefty rate of knots. And I know that a lot of people in the past have commented that I have not been overly fond of the Audi S3, and yes, the newer ones, I must confess, are not exactly the most exciting cars. They're kind of like a really, really good fridge. They do a fantastic job at fridge activities, but as a result they just have absolutely no soul. They're almost a little bit too perfect. Whereas this car is a little bit imperfect. You put your foot down at 2,000 RPM and absolutely nothing happens, and then at 3,000 suddenly, bang, whoa, there's all the boost. Whereas with the new ones, it's just power all the time, and this, you're kind of encouraged to work for the power a little bit. And the combination of the power delivery, the sound, the revs, and of course the manual transmission, which is just so fun to just hammer through the gears with this nice short slick throw, along with the excellent steering feel, the very nimble and chuckable chassis. The combination of everything, in my mind, makes this 8P a far more exciting 4-cylinder hot hatch than a lot of the newer ones. Yeah, sure, it's subjectively worse, you know, the dual clutches, faster gear change than the manual. The newer ones probably handle better, have much nicer interiors, and the like. So on paper, obviously, any normal person would pick a newer 8P S3. It is a really, really great car. But for me, I love a car that actually offers a bit of character, and this 8P definitely does. Next weekend, my friends and I are going to head up to Mount Ruapehu to take these cars on the snow. It'll be very interesting to see how this and the TT go. Hopefully I'll make a bit of a video out of our adventures there, but otherwise, hope you've enjoyed this restoration of this little S3. I've actually been really quite impressed with this little thing. I like it a lot. It's so fast, right to 7,000 RPM. What a great little car. If you'd like to see some other cars that I've restored in the past, then click the links popping up right about now, and I'll look forward to seeing